Welcome to Planet Poet, Words in Space. I'm your host, Sharon Israel, and my guest today is the teacher, editor, poet, and writer, Nancy Merritt Bell. Pamela Manché Pearce, Planet Poet's poet at large, will also join us later in the program. Nancy Merritt Bell is the great-great-great-grandniece of the poet Christopher Smart, and also a writer, book editor, and poet. Nancy grew up in the 60s in Athens, Greece, and Tucson, Arizona, and then moved to Toronto, Canada. Her two beatnik parents didn't allow her to watch TV, so what better to do but read? Everyone had to recite poems by heart on birthdays and special events and long car rides, which was often as Canada is a big country and all car rides are long. This came in handy when Nancy studied epic poetry at the University of Toronto and did graduate work at New York University. She underwrote her academic career by successfully working in development on a dozen TV series, including the Emmy-winning Anne of Avonlea, the Odyssey and Degrassi, and writing as many plays, such as The Meantime at the Centre Pompidou, Paris. In 2006, Nancy edited William Loizeaux's prize-winning kids' book, Wings. After moving to Brooklyn, Nancy went on to edit 20 books, including 4 by her husband, author Michael McKinley, who, by the way, has been on the show twice, with the most recent one, Diamond Dust, coming out in July. Nancy is currently editing the collected works of the poet Callum Tichenor, and also a collection of children's poetry by Sara Fymme, as well as Sarah's chapter book for kids in verse, Invisible Isabel. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Sharon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me
Oh,
to the best planet.
oh, the best planet, Planet Poet. I wanted to apologize for anything I've mispronounced in your bio. and uh, um, and we'll get to the poets that you will discuss that we'll discuss later, and we'll have a chance to repeat their names correctly.
Oh,
But
thanks.
Nancy, what inspired you to teach children poetry?
I grew up with enforced poetry, so somehow all this A. Milne and Robert Louis Stevenson, it was all in there somewhere. And then when my child, I have a daughter Rose, we were living in Vancouver, and the local library had a wonderful evening um, after hours at the library in your pajamas, and there was bedtime stories, there was popcorn. It was a wonderful, it almost seemed criminal. It was so much fun to eat in the library and be loud and run around. And one night that the librarian was not there, so I'm really a sop. I'm a total sop. So I offered to stand in, and I found that these poems that I remembered as a kid were just coming out, and I saw that little kids like babies were bopping around to the rhythm, and it was interactive. It just wasn't transporting. It was importing this music and rhythm. And I thought, oh, this is good. It was. And so from then I developed the workshop with the library and then with other libraries where I would go in with kids and it's called Booked, and we'd make a book in an hour or an afternoon. But really it was really teaching them poetry,
Right,
sharing
teaching,
poetry.
and that's an elusive art to teach children poetry. But if you take it as if it's like breathing, it's not too hard, right?
Exactly. And then we do know it's like it's a heart rhythm.
Hmm.
It's we live with. It's the connecting to our experience and old experience. It is. Uh, it's actually comes really naturally to kids. That was the wonderful discovery on my part that I could share back in the workshops.
Yeah, I like the heartbeat. We all have heartbeats, and da 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 da. It's all sort of iambic, it's like walking also.
It,
And
it is.
it's very intrinsic. And you taught through poetry games. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I found really a wonderful and immediate way to reach um, my young students, classmates, and my young poets was that if it was a game, and so there was automatically a sense of they were a participant and they could win. So we would play poetry games. I would start off with the insane name game, which is always a lot of fun. I would have their names beforehand, and I would make a poem out of their names, and I would read it really quickly. And I always hope that there's it's always great to have a Melinda or a Serinda, because they're wonderful and musical. And you hope that there's a Susie and a Kathy, because that rhymes with Nancy. And so they can hear all the names go together. Sharon, Karen, I'm always happy for that. It all goes to
And it's exciting for them to hear their name in a poem. So it brings them in.
yeah, and if they're listening, I have them to stand up and shout or wave, and that automatically gets them involved. So I like the physicality of it, because they're often, sitting at desks, and not that that makes sense until you're about 17 or 18.
Mhm.
So being up and running around and moving or waving
I
comes
agree.
naturally to a young body.
And how old are the students that you usually teach? What's the age span?
I will engage with students who are, preschool and kindergarten all the way up. I've done high school. I will share different material with the high school students. We might look at Beyonce's work and listen to her, the poetry of her songs. Might do some Shakespeare. So the poems that we look at will change, but there's some standards we'll look at. Haiku is for everyone and for eternity.
You have done something called the folding poem game. Could you briefly explain that and read one of these, the product of such a game?
Yeah. So this is based on the game where you would draw a picture of someone and you'd fold it over so no one knows what someone else did. So we do it with a poem, and the kids agree on the first line, and then they write a rhyming line and they pass it around the room. So we took it.
Oh, that's like Exquisite Corpse, almost.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
with a
it's
poem.
Tedesco.
So I recommend it to everyone. Like, we should all have poetry parties. So
Absolutely.
so this is we thought this was a winter time, so we all thought we missed the beach. So that was our theme. And the first line was, "And you hear the sand sing."
Mhm.
So as the poem unfolded, this is how it went. Beaching. Can you hear the sand sing? Ring, ring, ring. The sun makes everything bright, zing. Hot sand, ouch, sting. Ouching makes my mom bring her worried, worried looking. Fishes are inflating, but I'm off swimming. The next wave I'm catching.
That is so evocative. And all the gerunds work. All the INGs work.
Yes, it does start a great love for ing words and words. And so the kids only ever know what the last word is. So,
Oh, I see.
so that's how we engage as a poet and a poet on the sheet. So
That's very charming.
yeah, so that we enjoy that.
And Nancy, coming back to haiku from your booked workshops, you've helped children create haiku of all ages, children of all ages, correct?
Yes, it is. I think it's another one very beautiful form of poetry, and so enduring. I mean, from Basho, who's writing in the 1650s about nature, you just feel the beauty of it. We start off. I read one of Basho's haikus, and we clap, and you get the wonderful, very strong syllable, uh, uh, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5. And the kids, you can feel right away just how peaceful that is. And we think about what is peaceful, of course, the beach, or walking home. And we think of all these very beautiful, slow rhythms that are haiku and also that are in our lives.
And these don't rhyme, the ones you're going to be reading. Very interesting. I find also with haiku, it's a very short form with very few words, but it's very roomy because it encompasses a world. Like you were saying, it's, you can sort of swim in it,
It is, it's an
you know.
ocean. It sure is. And it's great. You can swim in it no matter your age. You can jump in, you can do long stretches, you can do short. I think it's a beautiful eternal form of poetry.
Hmm. Nancy, would you read some of the children's haiku poems?
Yes, I'm going to read uh, elementary, middle school, and one from high school, just so you can hear their focus changes. And but each is really each age is just as gorgeous. So these are the elementary kids, and we were talking about, well, when you think of haiku and you think of this rhythm, it's like, well, what comes to mind? And of course, the first one was the bell for school. So the first,
Mhm.
we got bell gone late for school. Paul lies long and so silent. Door opens on hello smiles. And I enjoy that. I think they really caught the idea that the
So good.
last line could bring a surprise.
Oh yeah, each line is it's complete. You know, each line tells a story, and the surprise of the final.
Yes, yes, and
The opening of the haiku actually is the opening of the door.
yes, yes, and the bell. This one was another sort of a group writing about something they all felt was haiku worthy. Uh, Soccer ball. Soccer ball kicks clouds, flying right by crying birds, up and over our loud cheers.
So full of sound,
Yeah,
so few words, so full of sound.
yeah, yeah, I did enjoy that because we looked at really just a quiet quality to the haiku, and it can be meditative. I thought this sort of like really blew it out the other side. So nice and loud was cheering, and the middle school ones are you can feel it's more more thoughtful. There's no cheering. Um, this one was inspired by ice cream. Summer ice cream melts. Soggy goes the sugar cone, melting on my sleeve. There was a boy, and he lives with his mother. It's just the two of them. So he wrote this haiku for her. So this is also for Mother's Day. She looks proud. She looks proud at me, hugs out all the breath of me. She smells like dinner.
That's lovely.
Yeah. So I also like to bring these and read them because there's so many of these poems that really stay with you as a teacher, as a mentor working with these kids. And this is the high school haiku. Um, you feel how they become much more social beings in the change of their subject. So a girl wrote this one. Um, this is where you sat, my friend. I see you there still, waiting for me and laughter.
That is very poignant, beautiful. I can you talk about your teaching and the children with such joy. It's a pleasure, Nancy. I want to talk to you about your book editing. Briefly, how did you begin editing children's books?
Came out of studying epic poetry as well as theater. And I worked in film and television in Canada and in other places, developing family TV. And I had a real enjoyment for, and so I think that drew me to um, children's literature. And having a kid and wanting to stay at home and work at home, um, and in a kinder, gentler life that publishing does offer. I met the writer William Loizeaux, who's just he's a lovely man, and he had started writing kids' books. And I said, well, I'd like to start editing books, so can I edit your book? And usually doesn't go that way. Usually the date goes the other way. It's like So, like, yeah.
Uh-huh,
So he couldn't really, I guess he couldn't say no, but he just,
uh-huh.
luckily,
And it was a prize-winning book, so you did a good
yeah,
job.
it was beautiful. And he went on to write a book inspired by Metamorphosis, Clarence the Human Cockroach. So he done some, wonderful
Wonderful.
books. And so from there, I got into book editing and children's books.
And could you tell us a little bit about Sara Fymme, if I'm pronouncing her
Yes,
name
yes, it's
correctly?
Sarah Pham. She is so she's one of the teachers I met along the way when I was doing workshops in libraries in Brooklyn. She's a teacher and she's a poet and she's also a person with a disability. She's profoundly deaf and she's also very shy. So it was I'm hard of hearing, and so we connected talking about like people who are hearing think that they're really listening, but they're not. We had like that. We had our hearing people jokes. We tell them we got together.
So how did you communicate?
Um, so she's got a cochlear implant, so she talks and she signs and
Okay.
but very quickly we got into emails and words, and that got us into she was working on a book and I really wanted to encourage it, and so she asked me to edit it, or I asked her if I couldn't edit it. It's another one of those dates I wasn't sure which way it was going to go, but
Uh-huh.
so yeah, she's as a teacher and as a writer, she has a lot of affinity for kids. Being a kid is, you're already kind of an outsider, but insider. And being someone with a disability, you're someone who's an outsider, who's an insider. So she could feel very strongly for kids who are living with a disability and growing up in, a non-disabled or without people around them with disabilities to relate to. So
Mhm.
she wanted stories for these kids. So she wrote Invisible Isabel.
And would you talk about that? Because you're editing it now or you finished it?
We're winding up, and we don't have a publisher yet. If anybody wants to know that, but yes, so we're winding up. Um, so the book is about Sam Hewley, she's has a limb difference. She has one leg that's longer than the other, and she's just moved into a new neighborhood, and she's going to go to a new school, and she's all excited. And the school has actually sent an envoy to check her out. It's perhaps not the nicest school, and the girl who comes is not the nicest. Her name is Mary Louise Lee, and she checks out Sam Hewley and doesn't think much of her, and is
Hmm.
probably having not too positive feelings about the disability. And also, Sam's house is haunted. So
Oh, that's a little interesting addition. Aside.
the house has a little something too. So Mary Lou really doesn't want anything to do with that. And away she runs, and Sam's feeling kind of, her family's very upset, but she wants to see a way through. And so she feels the way through is to accept everyone she meets. And the next person she meets is the ghost.
It's a ghost.
Yes,
A real outsider.
a real outsider. Yes, someone actually who is expecting to be rejected and not accepted.
It's interesting, beautiful idea. Would you read some?
This is the end of the first chapter, and Mary Lou has just run away, and Sam's brother, teenager Todd, is horrified, and
About the
uh,
ghost?
about that Sam has already been rejected by a classmate, and it's not looking good. His sister is kind of wacky, and the parents come in and they do take Sam's side, but they hope their son's respectful. So everyone's a little upset at this moment. Um, and we'll hear how it goes and how Sam handles it. So her folks shake their heads. Sam is too kind by half. But Todd, the brother, says, your weirdness will make snooters laugh. Snooters are the kids from the school. You're sad for that girl? Well, she's sorry for you. You lived in a house that smells worse than old food. And you had to go on and you had to be telling of things in this house that are more dreadful than smelling. Like our halls run around like a maze, and the nutsy old stuff which you thought would amaze, like your dance schemes and curl dreams and things that you think, and your lopsided self and your Christmas tree stink. Sam starts to quiver and blushes hotly red, embarrassed a bit by what Todd had just said. But Mom hugs her Sam and looks hard at her son with a kind of tough look that makes Todd want to run. Before you race off, know our Sam's fancy flies, so I think you had best to apologize. But Todd fumes. What I said was true. There's no lies. Sam laughs at her brother, who's turning 15, and all that he says sounds incredibly mean. She tells Todd right out, what I said is true. But he scoffs back at her. Here's what is true. When you're new at the school and kids snicker at you. Well, I do, says Sam, quite loud. Yes, yes, I do. With a shrug and a hug, her folks shuffle away. They're doing home repairs. There's a lot every day. Up spinning and grinning, Sam's curls all a-whirl, and a warm whirling feeling she's now a happy girl. She goes about giggling and laughs to herself. I'll find that old ghosty or odd little elf and find out what's sharing this old house with me. And I'll have a tee-hee with new company. And if they are a spirit or not real, we'll see. Right out of thin air sounds a mean little snicker. It twists in Sam's tongue, and it makes her feel sicker. She hears a short snort and another one more. Then a foot kicks off Sam where there's no foot before. And down she goes flump, right down hard on the floor. The old creepy feeling then gives Sam to fear. There really is something extra weird living here.
That's Nancy Merritt Bell reading from Invisible Isabel by Sara Fymme. It's very, very clear, and the rhyming really keeps it going. I like the fact that Todd and Sam have a pretty equal relationship. There's no, it's, her disability doesn't really factor into their relationship, and it's just what it is. And the family dynamic is very interesting also. And then you have the ghost who has made a little appearance right now. So
Yeah.
it's how do you edit rhyming poetry, Nancy?
Well, I would love to ask myself that. Uh, I it's a wonderful question, and I do. It's just something that I find I have to work on every level, story wise and character wise. I guess maybe how a conductor works with a new piece, and you make sure that different parts are working, and then when it all comes together, there's that great rhythm, the music that really drives it through, and you can feel you've worked on all the parts and you can feel when it all comes together. I think it's just like it's a greater whole, and I work on the parts till I feel they come together, and then I can really hear the music take over.
Thanks, Nancy. I also know in your teaching, you allow kids to talk about and write about things that can't be said. And there's a lot of poo in this and stink, and it's great. Could you just briefly talk about that? It's a very joyous inclusion.
Yeah, yes, yeah. I, I, I do. I think one of the aspects of the class and in being with the kids is the permission, because I am open. I want them to be. I work on a poem in class so they can take part and see what I'm doing, and it opens them up. And a part of that openness is always allowing language and different experiences. So they may, some of them can't say bum or ass or poo, and there's other four-letter words, and it goes on. And allowing that, and it's like looking at it as a word of value, and it rhymes. There's the poo rhymes with do so much. It's a great poetic term, an item.
It's lovely. Thank you, Nancy. I just want to ask you how you work with the author. Is through email? She sends you passages or pages, and then you work on them and send them back.
I do. So normally if I'm working other authors, I'll sit down, we'll have a couple story meetings, we'll Zoom or we'll be on the phone or something like that. But with Sara, she because she has a hearing, she's a person with a disability and she's shy. Uh, I will send her notes and she'll have my visual notes. I'll stress words in the rhyme. So she's also got a visual that she's working with, and she'll write back. So we'll scan and send each other material. So there's a visual element as well, and we'll get together on Zoom too. But it's a back and forth, and I do try and stay back, as much as possible, so that it's her endeavor, it's her creativity, it's her totality. Because if I come in too much, you can just feel, the air shift in the room. You can feel the
Right.
finger in the pie. It's like there's one too many chef. So I, really proceed with, a lot of respect and compassion and love for the material.
Thanks, Nancy. You're listening to Planet Poet Words in Space on WIOX Community Radio, live and local in the Catskills. I'm your host, Sharon Israel, here with my guest, teacher, editor, poet, and writer Nancy Merritt Bell. And joining us from Manhattan is Planet Poets Poet at Large, poet and visual artist Pamela Manché Pearce. After a struggle, Pamela has returned to her most productive writing practice at her desk when it is dark and done when it is light, or less poetically, from 7 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. Hello, Pamela.
Hello, Sharon. Hello, Nancy.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And today feels really special. I have been on many, many of these shows, but I've rarely been so amused and delighted as hearing you, Nancy. And I actually laughed out loud. That's not in the recording, but it did happen. So I am grateful for any laugh I can possibly have in my life. Thank you. Thank you both. We're closing down, today is the last day of Poetry Month, right? National Poetry Month.
Yes.
April, so we're closing that down, and it felt appropriate to focus on the work of a highly regarded American poet, and I've chosen Natasha Trethewey, who was Poet Laureate of the United States in 2012, and she won a Pulitzer Prize as well. Natasha Trethewey is a biracial daughter of a white father and a black mother who was born in Mississippi. And her work focuses a lot on exploring America's racial legacy. What I'm going to look at today is her 2002 book of poetry, Bellocq's Ophelia. And I have to thank an earlier guest on Planet Poet, Jerice J. Baptiste, for mentioning on the show that I was on with her, mentioning this book in another context. I was not aware of it, and I bought Bellocq's Ophelia as a result of that tip from Jerice, and I read it, and it was a rare book of poetry where I sat down and I couldn't put it down. I wanted to know what happened. It read like a novella or a novel, and I learned afterward that other people made the same comment. So it's a page turner, in addition to being a beautiful, beautiful book of poetry. What really prompted me today to do this is what has just happened with this tremendous settlement for Larry Nassar's abuse of the USA gymnasts, $138 million, which additionally is triggering off what the accusers of Jeffrey Epstein feel that they might have in store for them, and they might do better than they expected. So as this is all going on in my mind, I'm thinking, the idea of exploiting young girls, especially beautiful or talented ones, It always horrifies us, and it never goes away. And it's something that has been happening since the beginning of time. It's a subject that interests me, and I use this in my visual artwork in a series of collages called Some Girls. And it was began with my seeing a Paris Vogue from the 70s, where these beautiful, beautiful young girls were dressed up as adults and used as models in very provocative situations. So when I thought about that, I thought about this book by Trethewey, and I wanted to go back to it. Well, what happened is that as I read it again, I was very delighted to see and inspired to see how many poetic devices Trethewey can put into one book. And I think that I may be beginning today a new series on as poet at large on Planet Poet, which is Tools of the Trade. And I hope this will help other poets, and it certainly is helping me. One of the primary devices that she uses is this epistolary style. So I want to read the first poem in the book that refers to this and sets us off on this journey of Ophelia's journey. And it's called Letter Home. 4 weeks have passed since I left, and still I must write to you of no work. I'm worn down. I've worn down the soles and walked through the tightness of my new shoes, calling upon the merchants in their offices bustling. All the while, I kept thinking my plain English and good writing would secure for me some modest position. Though I dress each day in my best, hands covered with the lace gloves you crocheted, no one needs a girl. How flat that word sounds and heavy. My purse thins. I spend foolishly to make an appearance of quiet industry, to mask the desperation that tightens my throat. I sit watching. And what happens is Ophelia cannot get a job. So what happens to many, many beautiful young girls, she winds up in a brothel in New Orleans given another name. And what's particularly interesting about this book is that these are prostitutes who are Black women who look white. So they are mulattoes, they are octoroons. And that's what is particularly interesting about this book and these women that Bellocq photographed. So another device that Trethewey uses is using black and white over and over again in a bunch of different situations. And this is one that I found particularly poignant. Later, I took arsenic tablets. I swallowed to keep me fair, bleached white as stone. Whiter still, I am a reversed silhouette against the black backdrop where I pose now for photographs. A man named Bellocq. He visits often, buys time only to look through his lens. It seems I can sit for hours, suffer the distant eye he trains on me. Over and over again, it's like a plumb line through. Isn't that a great?
Yes, this is very powerful. I love, it just captures that the moment I wouldn't think that she suffers this watchful eye on her. Like, even just to be seen is a violation.
Exactly.
It's so beautifully written, too.
It's all beautifully written.
Oh my God.
It is all beautifully written. And another technique or device that she uses is similar to stage directions. So this is these young girls are on display in this brothel, and they're chosen and they're costumed and they're given other names. And here's an excerpt where she says, this is referring to the madam of the house. She calls me Violet now, a common name here in Storyville, except I am the African violet, for the promise of the wild continent hidden beneath my white skin. At her cue, I walked slowly across the room, paused in strange postures until she called out, "Tableau vivant," and I could move again. All this to show. The language is powerful. I mean, she's using very, very powerful language, and you can, and Trethewey is so adept. She moves back and forth. She becomes the photographer, Bellocq. She becomes Violet. She becomes the madam. She's the girl who's writing home and saying that she can't get a job. So I am very grateful to her for all of these. I'll read one more excerpt where ekphrastically she uses photographer's terms, and she says, "In the parlor today, a man resolved to find the hint that would betray me, make me worth the fee. He wore a monocle, moved in close, his breath hot on my face. I looked away from my reflection, small and distorted in his lens." She never wavers from her theme. She just threads it from beginning to end, and it's very inspiring.
So
Fascinating.
visual, I feel like I can see it. I can see herself.
Yes.
Just so powerful, robbed of her name, Ophelia, and given one Violet. It's like, and harkens back to her darkness, though she's eating,
Yes.
poison to look white. Just the
Yes. And Trethewey says tableau vivant, but she brings everything to life.
I think that for us poets, that Trethewey is not afraid to put tremendous pressure on all of her devices. She works them and she works them and she works them fearlessly. So she's very inspiring to us.
Pamela Manché Pearce, Poet at Large, thank you so much for your tableau vivant, for this fabulous work and comments you brought to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Pamela. Yeah, that's a great segue to go into a more innocent, hopefully innocent poetry that children create. And, but like within Isabel, Invisible Isabel, there's so much suffering and real pain and emotion that it's beautifully expressed. Nancy, would you tell us a little bit about a tragic story involved with another poet, Callum
Tichenor. Callum
Tichenor.
Yeah.
Another poet that you are editing now. Would you just talk a little bit about him?
Yes. So Callum Tichenor we lost him. He died November 1st this last year. He was 21. It was he was involved in fentanyl, and he had fentanyl overdose, and he was found dead on November 1st. His dad, James Tichenor, is a wonderful man and a dear friend, and we're working together to edit Callum's work. Callum was an amazing poet. At the age of 21, he had maybe 300 or 400 poems he'd worked on. He's self-taught. He loved Baudelaire. He loved Yeats. He loved Eliot. He has poems that refer to the albatross. So I know he was at Coleridge. He was out there. I feel as a writer, he may have been very isolated. I don't think there was not a circle of poets that he was working with. So I know he was intensely working, alone and with poets that he had read. So in collecting his work, some very powerful poems, and some, for the age of 21, some of them are really hot, and some of them are very funny. He's got an enormous range. We're going through and finding which ones to go in his collection. It's probably be a private publishing, but I will also hope that there'll be a website and his Callum's poems will be widely offered, because this is his immortality. And his poems really deserve it.
Will it be a full collection?
I'm going to say yes. There will probably be about 100 poems. So as a mom, as a friend, as an editor, it's also really hard to say no, because if that poem doesn't make the cut, it's going to go, it will be in limbo, as it were. So we just want to collect all his poems. Some of them are very finished, some of them are very polished and gorgeous, and some of them are, on the brink with very rich ideas, about love and perception and being lost and what it is to wander around Canterbury. He traveled. He worked on a farm, so he was living very intensely.
Yeah.
And that.
Would you read a poem of Callum's, please, for us?
I will. This is he will actually have a couple of poems published posthumously as well as his book. This is one I quite adore. This is called The Spider, and it was written in 2021, so after the pandemic, and he's 19. So it's called The Spider. When the larches golden flared, and the ravens loud declared, the autumn woods were theirs to reign, we let the spider in again. And every day she'd dial and loom another web around the room, until it seemed she'd shut our eyes. For when the morning hit the skies, a snow put the veil to sleep beneath an ether far and deep. And we were like two flies entwined upon some corner out of mind. Don't pine, I said, but let us go, like careless lovers through the snow, to lie beneath some naked larch, unthinking of reprieve in March, until my heart is wintered too. My lips may utter words to you more passionate than anything which can be uttered in the spring.
Mm. That's Nancy Merritt Bell reading The Spider by Callum Tichenor. Wow, how romantic. It really harks back to Romanticism, which he was steeped in.
Yes, it feels like that's what he loved, and I read him, and it does wake back to me all the great romantic poets, and Keaton. He does certainly does pay tribute. He does write tribute poems. He's got some very saucy Baudelaire style poems that are in the collection. Yeah, it's what a wonderful talent, wonderful talent. I would be happy to write like that. It's really,
It's very mature for one so young. I mean,
yes,
very mature
yes. So I'm glad to be working on
in the romantic tradition.
yes,
right?
yes, and I think he knew that and was writing poems to that and loving those poets. And I'm glad he got to the corners, and he also wrote some smaller gems, and a couple of nonsense poems to
A
always,
nice variety.
yeah, great variety. So, but every day he was writing.
So when do you think the book will emerge?
We're trying to aim for it to be ready. Our book launch is set for November 1st, so it would be a year memorial.
Okay. Wow. Nancy, you are a poet. You write poetry. We've talked about all your teaching, your editing, your I want you to introduce your own poetry. I know you enjoy children's poetry. And I'm quoting you. I enjoy kids' poetry. I know they think the world is odd, and they relish the weirdness and have way more fun than adults. I exult in their joy and share in poems and share back in poems. I love that. And you relish their weirdness, and the world is odd.
Growing odder.
I know. And they're the best journalists
Yeah,
and poets to convey this.
yeah. We need more poets. We do.
So how long have you been writing children's poetry?
Probably in earnestness for about the last 5 or 7 years. I just, as a book editor and also writing novels, they take so long. And it's great to have something satisfying, like a good bite-sized literary experience, and poems offer that. It's like, I'm telling the kids this, is like, hang on, I know this is true too. So I started writing poems and working on them in class with the kids, and they could see that this is a good part of life.
Right. And you write them for kids.
I do. Yeah, I do write them for kids. I write them in their class. I write them to it. Um, I have shall I go right into that? This is
Please.
yeah, this is
I
one.
want you to rude fruits and true fruits.
So in the wonderful weirdness of kids who actually seem so sane to me, I have my lunch with them when we're working, and there was a boy who was eating a mango, and I said, "You like mangoes?" It's just, it's like his head was almost as big as the mango, and he said, "Yeah, that's a good fruit." And I thought, "Oh, okay." And I'm going home, and I saw a durian, and I'm like, "Oh." And I picked it up, and it was like, it hurt. It's really spiky, and that must be a bad fruit. So, and that's where this poem came from. There we go. So, rude fruits and true fruits. The ruddy, plumpety little cherry, I admit I find quite scary. Yes, indeed, it's true and very. For as I take a weeny bit, I gag and snag its tiny bit, which I must hoard and hack and spit, or flap and gasp. I'll choke on it. Is it safe, the kiwi fruit? Its seedy self sure makes me toot. And the handsome persimmon I see so lush. But when it's ripe, it tastes like mush. To hear a tomato's a fruit like these, that salady red thing, oh, please. And the dinosaurish durian, I shut my eyes and then I hurry on. There is no hope for the cantaloupe, and the kumquat I like not. Beware of these crude and very rude fruits, these hairy and scary and so seedy brutes. Of this kind, there is a ton. But for me, there's only one whose sweetly juice is of a taste so great there's not a drop to waste. And slurpingly slow I go to the mango. Mangon.
Nancy, I wish I had your poems when I was a kid. They would have given me a lot of joy.
I will send you some more. You can
Oh,
have your kid
please,
moment with
please.
them.
We this show just flew by, and this is not all you do. You write poetry, you edit, you teach, and you also work with Michael McKinley, your husband, in several very intense projects. Would you just briefly discuss your creating a new press?
Yes, we're working with collaborating with other writers. The poet Michael Franco is one. To create a new press, we'd like to create something, I guess, rebellious, that changes the publishing way, and that we're more responsive to writers, and we can put out a book more quickly. I mean, with the digital world, it allows us to do this, to do a book in 4 or 5 months and have it out there. So we're creating a more efficient, more you know, a quicker press that's not the glacial pace of publishing. And so we're gathering a few books now, and we hope to have them out. We're aiming to have them out by Christmas.
That's very nice. You should say we're kind to writers. That's should be your
We're
your,
called Book
your
Go. One word, Book Go.
oh.
Where you go, Book Go. That's us.
There's also another intriguing novel that you're involved with called Glamour of Evil. And if you briefly tell us about this.
Yes. So my husband and I are working on, but we're finishing the edit right now. It's first in a spy series. It's about, well, I should say, in the spy world, there is a giant and very old spy agency. The biggest one in the world is, in fact, the the Catholic Church.
Woo.
Yes. So since, the Spanish Inquisition, hundreds of years in the making, the Catholic Church has its spies and its gossip and its intrigue everywhere on the planet. Possibly every Catholic, even if that sounds a little mysterious. So our story is about a woman who is an Oxford grad, and she's tapped by her Oxford mentor to go to Rome. And she is at the same time tapped by her boss, who's in charge of the television show, Teddy Wright, to get the Pope for an interview. The Pope's coming to America. So she's, her name is Maddie Lynch, and she's off in Rome, and she finds out that in fact the Vatican has other ideas for her, and they enlist her as a spy. They want her to look for missing Jewish gold, and this is actually based on a true story that the Croatian Stasi, working closely with the Nazis, had in fact taken a lot of Jewish money and put it in Swiss bank, and the Vatican knew well about this, and it's been years in trying to process this and find it. But over those years, some of the money has gone missing. And Vatican, our fictional story moves in. The Vatican now wants Maddie to try and find out what happened to the money. And by the way, her father had tried to do the same, and he was killed.
Oh, that's the glamour of evil. And I think the Vatican is acting as good guys, right? To return the money. Well, I want to read that too.
I think the Vatican's playing all sides here.
Nancy Merritt Bell, it's been such a pleasure. What a delightful guest you are, and your beautiful work. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to read the poems of, I have a writer who has a disability, and and I have a young writer, author, Callum Tichenor, who's not with us anymore. I'm really glad to share their work.
So important. Thank you so much. And thank you, Poet at Large, Pamela Manché Pearce, for your piercing and great commentary and reading on Trethewey. And thank you all so much for listening.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.